Jake Morrison stared at the screen in front of him and rubbed his tired eyes. He had been working at the space station for 3 years now, and nothing exciting ever happened. The orbital defense station Haven 7 floated quietly around Earth like a metal guardian watching over the blue planet below. Jake's job was simple: watch the deep space scanners and report anything unusual. Most days he saw nothing but empty space and distant stars. Dr. Lisa Carter walked into the control room carrying 2 cups of coffee. She was the station's expert on alien life forms, though she had never actually seen any aliens. Earth had been searching for other life in the universe for decades, but had found nothing. Lisa handed Jake his coffee and sat down at her own workstation. "Anything interesting today?" she asked while checking her own screens. Lisa studied the data that came from space telescopes and radio dishes all around the solar system. Her job was to look for signs of life, but most days she only found cosmic dust and radiation. Jake shook his head and took a sip of his coffee. Same as always: empty space and more empty space. He turned back to his scanner display and froze. Something was wrong. The screen showed strange readings at the edge of the solar system. The gravity measurements were acting weird, as if something very heavy was moving out there. "Lisa, come look at this," Jake said quietly. His voice had changed from bored to worried in just a few seconds. Lisa rolled her chair over to his station and looked at the readings. Her face went pale as she saw the numbers. "That's impossible," she whispered. "Those gravity readings suggest something massive is out there, but we can't see anything on the visual scanners." She quickly started typing commands into her computer, trying to get more information from the deep space sensors. Over the next hour, more strange readings appeared. The gravity distortions were getting stronger and moving closer to Earth. Jake called his supervisor and reported the unusual activity. Within minutes, alarms started going off all over the space station. Captain Ryan Torres was having lunch on his ship when the emergency message came through. The defense cruiser Valiant was one of Earth's most powerful warships, equipped with the latest weapons and shields. Ryan had served in the Space Navy for 15 years and had never faced a real threat. Most of his missions involved routine patrols and training exercises. "Captain, we're receiving priority alerts from all the defense stations," his communications officer reported. "Something big is happening at the edge of the solar system." Ryan immediately ordered his ship to high alert and called for an emergency meeting with his senior officers. In the briefing room, his crew studied the data coming from Haven 7 and other monitoring stations throughout the solar system. "The readings don't make sense," his science officer explained. "We're detecting massive objects, but they're not showing up on our cameras or radar. It's like they're invisible but still affecting gravity around them." On Earth, President Helen Walsh was in an important meeting when her security chief burst into the room. General Pete Adams was a serious man who never interrupted meetings, unless something terrible was happening. His face was grim as he whispered urgent words into the president's ear. "Ladies and gentlemen, I need to end this meeting immediately," President Walsh announced to the confused diplomats and advisors around the conference table. She followed General Adams out of the room and into a secure briefing area deep inside the government building. "Madam President, our deep space monitoring systems are detecting what appears to be a large fleet of unknown objects approaching Earth," General Adams explained as he showed her the data on a large screen. "They appeared without warning and they're not responding to any of our communication attempts." President Walsh studied the information carefully. She had been briefed many times about the possibility of contact with alien life, but no one had expected it to happen like this. "How long until they reach Earth?" "At their current speed, approximately 6 hours, the general replied. "We're mobilizing all available defense forces, but we have no idea what we're dealing with." Back on Haven 7, Jake and Lisa watched in amazement as the invisible objects suddenly became visible. Massive ships appeared on their screens as if someone had just turned off a cloaking device. The ships were unlike anything humans had ever built. They looked like giant crystals floating through space, each one the size of a small city. "My God," Lisa breathed as she counted the ships on her screen. "There are hundreds of them." The alien fleet moved with perfect coordination toward Earth's outer colonies. Jake tried to contact the mining stations and research outposts in the outer solar system, but many were not responding to his calls. As he watched his screen, he saw the first attack. A beam of bright energy shot out from one of the crystal ships and struck a mining station. The station simply vanished in a flash of light. No explosion, no debris, just gone. Jake felt sick as he realized that dozens of people had just died in an instant. Captain Torres and his fleet raced toward the outer system to defend the colonies, but they were too late. One by one, Earth's outposts disappeared under the alien attack. The crystal ships moved methodically from target to target, destroying everything in their path. "Fire all weapons!" Captain Torres ordered, as his ship came within range of the alien fleet. The Valiant's missiles and energy cannons unleashed their full power against the nearest crystal ship. The weapons struck the alien vessel, but had no effect. The ship's surface simply absorbed the energy and continued moving as if nothing had happened. Other Earth ships arrived and joined the attack, but their weapons were equally useless against the alien technology. The crystal ships didn't even seem to notice the human fleet. They continued their systematic destruction of Earth's outer defenses. Then something strange happened. The aliens stopped attacking. The crystal ships hung in space, silent and motionless. Captain Torres waited for them to resume their assault. But minutes passed with no action from the alien fleet. Jake tried to contact the alien ships from Haven 7. He sent radio messages in multiple languages, trying to establish communication. The moment his transmission reached the alien fleet, every crystal ship turned toward Earth. Bright energy beams shot out from dozens of ships, targeting every human vessel and station that had sent radio signals. In seconds, half of Earth's defense fleet was destroyed. The message was clear. Any attempt at communication would result in immediate attack. The aliens didn't want to talk. They wanted complete silence. President Walsh watched the battle reports with growing horror. Earth's most advanced weapons were useless against the invaders, and any attempt to communicate with them triggered overwhelming retaliation. The alien fleet began moving toward Earth's inner colonies, leaving a trail of destruction behind them. The invasion had begun, and humanity's greatest strength, their ability to communicate and coordinate, had become their greatest weakness. The crystal ships wanted one thing from Earth: absolute, total silence. 6 months had passed since the crystal ships arrived, and everything had changed. Dr. Ben Rodriguez crawled through a narrow tunnel beneath the ruins of New York City, carrying a bag of old electronics and homemade tools. The tunnel was part of an underground network that stretched for miles beneath the dead city above. The aliens had won quickly and completely. Their crystal ships now floated above every major city on Earth, casting long shadows over the silent streets below. Strange devices that looked like metal flowers had been placed throughout the cities, creating what people called silence zones. These devices detected any electronic signal, any radio wave, any digital communication, and immediately called down destruction from the ships above. Ben emerged from the tunnel into a hidden basement where Amy Collins waited with her resistance cell. Amy had been a police officer before the invasion, but now she led one of the largest underground groups fighting the aliens. Her people had learned to communicate without technology, using hand signals, written messages, and coded taps on walls and pipes. "Any luck with the radio parts?" Amy asked quietly. Even in their hidden base, everyone spoke in whispers. The alien devices could detect loud voices from several blocks away, and automated hunter machines would come searching for the source. Ben shook his head sadly. "The signal dampeners are getting stronger. Even the simplest radio won't work within 5 miles of the city center." He emptied his bag on a wooden table, showing Amy the collection of broken electronics he had salvaged from abandoned stores and offices. In the months since the invasion, humans had been forced to live like their ancestors did hundreds of years ago. Without computers, phones, or radios, people communicated using mirrors to flash signals in sunlight, smoke fires to send coded messages, and runners who carried written notes between communities. Amy's resistance cell had become experts at this primitive communication. They had developed an elaborate system of hand signals that could convey complex information without making a sound. Children like 12-year-old Tim Baker had become especially valuable because they were small enough to crawl through air vents and drainage tunnels without being detected by the alien sensors. Tim sat in the corner of the basement, carefully copying a message onto a piece of paper. His job was to carry information between resistance cells in different parts of the city. He had memorized dozens of secret routes through the underground tunnels and could move across the city without ever appearing on the surface where the alien patrols might spot him. "Tim, I need you to take this message to the group in the subway tunnels," Amy said, handing him the paper. "Tell them we're planning to test Dr. Rodriguez's new communication device tomorrow night." Tim nodded and slipped the message into his shoe. If he was caught by an alien patrol, he would step on the paper and the special ink would dissolve, leaving no trace of the message. He disappeared into the tunnel system like a ghost, moving through the darkness beneath the occupied city. On the other side of the country, Captain Ryan Torres crouched in a forest clearing with the remains of his crew. His ship, the Valiant, had been destroyed in the first week of the invasion, but he and some of his men had escaped in lifeboats and made it to Earth. Now they lived in the wilderness, attacking alien supply convoys and trying to gather information about the invaders. Torres had learned that the crystal ships were not just destroying human technology, they were collecting something. His scouts had reported seeing the aliens loading strange containers onto their ships after each attack. The containers glowed with a soft blue light and seemed to be very important to the alien forces. Dr. Lisa Carter knew what was in those containers, and the knowledge made her sick with fear. She had been captured during a raid on an alien facility 3 weeks ago, and what she had seen inside the crystal ship would haunt her forever. The aliens were not destroying human communication equipment because they feared it. They were harvesting it. The strange creatures inside the crystal ships fed on something that came from complex communication, the neural patterns created when humans talked, argued, sang, and expressed emotions. Lisa had escaped when her alien captors became distracted by a feeding session. She had watched in horror as they consumed energy patterns taken from a captured radio broadcast of a family saying goodbye to each other. The aliens had absorbed the emotional content of the message like humans might taste a fine wine. Now Lisa was hiding in the Rocky Mountains with a group of scientists and engineers who were working on something called Project Whisper. Deep in an abandoned military bunker, engineer Kate Miller and physicist Dr. Alex Stone were trying to turn human communication into a weapon. "The theory is sound," Dr. Stone explained to the group gathered around his makeshift laboratory. "If the aliens feed on our communication patterns, we might be able to overwhelm their systems by giving them too much to process at once." Kate Miller had been working on the technical aspects of the plan. Before the invasion, she had designed communication satellites for the space program. Now she was trying to figure out how to turn the aliens' own technology against them. "We need to create a feedback loop," she explained while pointing to diagrams drawn on old paper. "If we can broadcast multiple complex signals simultaneously, their harvesting equipment might overload." The work was slow and dangerous. The scientists had to test their theories without using any electronic equipment that might alert the alien. Sensors. They built mechanical calculators and used chemical reactions to power their experiments. Meanwhile, in the occupied cities, life had become a nightmare of enforced silence. People communicated through written notes and hand signals. Families were separated because traveling between cities was nearly impossible without triggering the alien detection systems. The aliens had also released hunter drones into the cities. These machines looked like flying metal spiders and were programmed to search for any sign of organized human activity. They could detect body heat, movement patterns, and even elevated heart rates that might indicate someone was planning resistance activities. Amy Collins had lost many good people to the hunter drones. The machines were fast and deadly, equipped with energy weapons that could kill a human instantly. But Amy had learned their weaknesses. The drones followed predictable patrol patterns and had trouble detecting humans, who moved very slowly and stayed close to sources of heat like steam pipes and electrical generators. Ben Rodriguez had made an important discovery during his salvage operations. The alien signal dampeners were not perfect. They had blind spots and weak points that could be exploited by someone who understood electronics. He had managed to build a short-range communication device that could work for a few minutes before being detected. "We can use this to coordinate attacks," Ben explained to Amy as he showed her the small device hidden inside what looked like a broken flashlight. "If we time it right, we can send a signal and then move before the hunter drones arrive." Tim Baker had become one of Amy's most trusted messengers. Despite his young age, he had proven to be incredibly brave and resourceful. He had mapped most of the tunnel system beneath the city and could navigate in complete darkness, using only his hands to feel the walls. During one of his missions, Tim had discovered something important. He had seen alien workers removing human books, paintings, and musical instruments from abandoned buildings. The aliens seemed particularly interested in items that contained human creativity and emotional expression. "They're stealing our culture," Tim reported to Amy when he returned from his mission. "I saw them loading trucks with everything from the art museum and the music school." This information reached Dr. Carter through the Resistance communication network. She realized that the aliens were not just feeding on live human communication, they were also harvesting the emotional patterns stored in human art and literature. The aliens had been a spacefaring civilization for thousands of years, but they had lost something important along the way. They had sacrificed their own ability to communicate and express emotions in exchange for technological advancement. Now, they survived by stealing these qualities from other species. Dr. Carter shared this discovery with the scientists working on Project Whisper. If the aliens were addicted to human emotional expression, then that addiction might be turned into a weakness. The key was finding a way to give them more than they could handle. As winter approached, the resistance cells across Earth began preparing for something big. Messages passed through underground tunnels, across wilderness trails, and through coded signals flashed between mountain peaks. The aliens had silenced human technology, but they had not silenced the human spirit. In her hidden base beneath New York, Amy Collins looked at a map covered with marks indicating resistance cells across North America. Similar networks existed on every continent, all working toward the same goal. The aliens had made one crucial mistake when they demanded silence from humanity. They had underestimated how loudly humans could scream when they finally decided to fight back. Dr. Lisa Carter ran through the frozen forest, her breath coming in sharp puffs as she dodged between the dark trees. Behind her, the sound of alien hunter drones grew fainter with each step. She had escaped from the crystal ship with information that could change everything. But first, she had to reach the resistance base alive. 3 days earlier, Lisa had been captured during a raid on an alien harvesting facility. What she discovered inside the crystal ship was both horrifying and hopeful. The aliens called themselves the HFY, and they had been traveling through space for millennia, feeding on the communication patterns of other civilizations. HFY ships contained massive chambers filled with swirling energy. These quantum resonance rooms could capture and amplify any form of communication, from simple radio signals to complex emotional expressions. Lisa had watched in fascination and disgust as the aliens fed on energy patterns taken from human art, music, and recorded conversations. But she had also discovered something the aliens didn't want anyone to know. The HFY had once been very much like humans. Their ancient records showed a civilization rich in art, literature, and emotional expression. They had given up these qualities thousands of years ago in pursuit of technological perfection, and now they could only experience emotion by stealing it from others. Lisa reached the hidden entrance to the mountain base just as snow began to fall. She stumbled through the concealed doorway and into the warm underground facility where Dr. Alex Stone and Kate Miller were working on Project Whisper. "Lisa, we thought you were dead!" Kate exclaimed as she helped the exhausted scientist to a chair. "What happened to you?" Between gasps for breath, Lisa told them everything she had learned about the HFY and their feeding process. The information sent excitement through the resistance base as scientists and engineers realized the implications of her discovery. If their ships are designed to process and amplify human communication, then we might be able to overload their systems, Dr. Stone said thoughtfully. But we would need to coordinate something massive, bigger than anything we've attempted before. Jake Morrison arrived at the mountain base 2 days later with a team of communication specialists. His space station had been destroyed, but he had managed to salvage important equipment before escaping to Earth. Among his team was Maria Santos, a former radio engineer who understood frequency manipulation better than anyone. "The problem is range," Maria explained as she studied the equipment available to them. "We can build transmitters, but the alien signal dampeners will detect and destroy them within minutes. We need a way to broadcast simultaneously from multiple locations across the entire planet." The solution came from an unexpected source. Tim Baker, the young messenger who had been carrying information between resistance cells, arrived with news from the cities. He had discovered that the aliens were using human infrastructure to power their signal dampeners. "They've connected their machines to our power plants and communication towers," Tim reported to the assembled group. "But that means their equipment is vulnerable to the same kind of attacks that would work on human technology." Kate Miller realized immediately what this meant. If we can access the old communication networks for just a few minutes, we could broadcast to the entire world before the aliens can stop us. Plans began forming quickly as resistance leaders from across the globe were contacted through the underground communication network. General Pete Adams, now leading a guerrilla force in the eastern United States, coordinated with similar groups in Europe, Asia, and South America. In London, Colonel Nick Taylor commanded a resistance cell that had taken shelter in the abandoned subway tunnels. His people had discovered that the alien technology had trouble penetrating deep underground, especially through the old Victorian-era iron and brick construction. "We've identified 12 major communication hubs that are still partially functional," Taylor reported through a coded message transmitted by mirror signals across the Atlantic. "If we can coordinate simultaneous attacks, we might be able to override the alien jamming systems long enough to broadcast." In South America, Captain Rosa Valdez led a group of former military personnel who had been conducting hit-and-run attacks against alien supply lines. Her forces had captured several pieces of HFY technology and were beginning to understand how the alien systems worked. "Their quantum resonance chambers are incredibly sensitive," Valdez reported through the resistance network. "They're designed to detect and process even the smallest emotional nuances in communication. That sensitivity might be exploitable." Dr. Carter worked with the other scientists to develop a new version of Project Whisper. Instead of trying to destroy the alien ships with conventional weapons, they would attack the HFY where they were most vulnerable, their addiction to human emotional expression. "We need to create a communication storm," Lisa explained to the assembled resistance leaders. "Every form of human expression broadcast simultaneously. Music, poetry, arguments, declarations of love, children laughing, people crying. The aliens won't be able to resist trying to process all of it at once." The plan required precise timing and enormous risk. Resistance cells around the world would have to emerge from hiding and seize control of communication facilities, knowing that the alien response would be swift and deadly. Amy Collins prepared her people in New York for their part in the operation. They had identified an old radio station in Manhattan that was connected to a powerful transmission tower. If they could hold the facility for just 10 minutes, they could broadcast to most of the eastern United States. "Remember, once we start transmitting, every alien ship in the area will target our position," Amy warned her team. "We need to be ready to evacuate the moment the broadcast begins." Ben Rodriguez had spent weeks modifying equipment to work without triggering the alien sensors. His makeshift transmitters were crude but functional, designed to boost and relay signals between different resistance cells. "The beauty of this plan is that we're not trying to communicate with the aliens," Ben explained to his technical team. "We're communicating with each other, and the aliens won't be able to resist eavesdropping." Captain Torres and his guerrilla forces prepared to attack alien signal dampeners in rural areas, hoping to create gaps in the jamming network that would allow the resistance broadcasts to reach their targets. As the day of the operation approached, resistance members around the world gathered materials for their broadcasts. They collected recordings of human music, poetry, and literature. Parents prepared to read stories to their children over the radio. Musicians tuned their instruments for performances that might be heard across continents. The night before the attack, Tim Baker carried final coordination messages between the resistance cells in New York. As he moved through the dark tunnels beneath the city, he thought about all the people who had died during the 6 months of alien occupation. Tomorrow, humanity would finally get a chance to fight back. In her laboratory, Dr. Carter made final adjustments to the equipment that would analyze the alien response to their communication storm. If the plan worked, the HFY quantum resonance chambers would overload, leaving their ships vulnerable to conventional weapons. "The irony is perfect," she said to Kate Miller as they worked through the night. "They came here because they're addicted to our ability to communicate and express emotion. Tomorrow we're going to give them more human expression than they can handle." Jake Morrison checked and rechecked the broadcast equipment one final time. As a former space station operator, he understood the importance of precise timing in communication operations. Every resistance cell around the world would need to begin their broadcasts within seconds of each other for the plan to work. "This is either going to be humanity's greatest victory or our final scream of defiance," he said to Maria Santos as dawn approached. "Either way, the aliens are going to learn that humans don't know how to be quiet." Above ground, the crystal. Ships floated silently over the occupied cities, their quantum resonance chambers hungrily waiting for the next taste of human communication to harvest. The Kethvar had no idea that in a few hours they were about to receive more human expression than their systems could possibly process. The resistance was ready to make some noise. At exactly noon, Greenwich Mean Time, the silence ended with a roar that could be heard around the world. Amy Collins stood in the abandoned radio station in Manhattan, her hand hovering over the transmission switch. Through the broken windows, she could see the massive crystal ship floating above the city like a dark cloud. For 6 months, that ship had enforced absolute silence on 8 million people. Now it was time to wake them up. "All units, this is Freedom Base," Amy spoke into the microphone as she flipped the switch. "Operation Babel is go. Repeat, Operation Babel is go." Instantly, radio stations across the globe came alive as resistance fighters seized control of transmitters, cell towers, and broadcast facilities. In London, Colonel Taylor's team had taken the BBC transmission center. In Tokyo, resistance members had captured a powerful military communication array. In Buenos Aires, Captain Valdez's forces had seized control of 3 radio stations simultaneously. But these were not military communications or strategic orders. Instead, the airwaves filled with something the aliens had never experienced in such intensity: pure human expression. In New York, Amy began reading from a book of poetry while her team played recordings of children singing, lovers arguing, and families laughing together. The broadcasts mixed together into a chaotic symphony of human emotion that poured out across the radio waves. "Do not go gentle into that good night," Amy read passionately into the microphone. "Rage, rage against the dying of the light." Across town, Tim Baker sat in another radio station with a group of teenagers, all taking turns at the microphone. They told jokes, sang songs they remembered from before the invasion, and shared stories about their dreams for the future. "This is Tim calling out to everyone who can hear me," the young man said boldly. "We're still here, we're still human, and we're not afraid of you anymore." The effect on the alien ships was immediate and dramatic. The crystal vessels that had hung, motionless over Earth's cities for months, suddenly began to pulse with bright energy. Their quantum resonance chambers, designed to carefully harvest and process small amounts of human communication, were being overwhelmed by the flood of emotional expression. Dr. Stone and Kate Miller watched their monitoring equipment from the mountain base as energy readings from the alien ships spiked beyond anything they had recorded before. The Kethvar vessels were trying to process thousands of simultaneous broadcasts, each one packed with the kind of complex emotional content they found irresistible. "It's working!" Kate shouted over the noise of their equipment. "The alien ships are drawing so much power to process the communications that their other systems are failing." High above the Earth, Jake Morrison piloted a small aircraft toward one of the crystal ships. As the alien vessel's defensive systems struggled to cope with the communication overload, gaps appeared in their shields and weapons systems. For the first time since the invasion began, human technology was working properly near the alien ships. "This is Jake Morrison to all resistance forces," he broadcast over the radio. "The alien jamming systems are failing. Repeat, they're jamming. Systems are down. All units are free to use electronic equipment." The moment those words went out, the real battle began. Captain Torres led his guerrilla forces in coordinated attacks on alien ground installations. With their communication systems restored, human military units could finally work together effectively. But the most powerful weapon in the human arsenal was not guns or bombs, it was their voices. In Paris, resistance members had taken control of the Eiffel Tower's radio equipment and were broadcasting a concert of classical music mixed with passionate speeches in French. In Moscow, former soldiers read war poetry, while children sang traditional folk songs. In Cairo, storytellers shared ancient tales, while musicians played instruments that had been hidden for months. The broadcasts were not random noise. They were carefully chosen examples of human creativity and emotional depth. Dr. Carter had worked with resistance cells around the world to select communications that would be most overwhelming to the alien processing systems. The HFY feed on emotional complexity, she had explained during the planning stages. We need to give them the most complex, beautiful, and passionate examples of human expression we can find. In a radio station in Berlin, a former opera singer performed an aria while resistance fighters read love letters that couples had written to each other during the occupation. The alien ship above the city began to shake as its quantum resonance chambers tried to process the overwhelming flood of human emotion. Maria Santos had set up a powerful transmitter in the Rocky Mountains that was boosting and coordinating signals from around the world. Her equipment mixed together dozens of different broadcasts, creating a global conversation that spanned continents and languages. All stations, this is Maria at Coordination Central, she announced. Signal strength is excellent. Keep broadcasting. The aliens can't resist listening to us. The truth of that statement was becoming obvious as alien ships around the world began to malfunction. Their hulls, which had been perfectly smooth crystal surfaces, now showed cracks and energy discharges. The quantum resonance chambers inside were overheating as they tried to process more human communication than they had ever encountered. General Adams, commanding resistance forces from a hidden bunker in Virginia, watched satellite feeds of the battle with amazement. The alien ships that had seemed invincible for 6 months were now struggling to maintain altitude as their power systems diverted energy to their communication processing equipment. All military units, this is General Adams, he broadcast over the restored communication networks. The aliens are vulnerable. Attack pattern Delta is authorized. Take down those ships. Human fighter jets, tanks, and missile batteries that had been useless against alien technology for months suddenly found their targets. With the alien defensive systems overwhelmed by the communication storm, conventional weapons could finally damage the crystal ships. But even as human forces pressed their attack, the broadcasts continued. The goal was not just to defeat the aliens, but to overwhelm them so completely with human expression that they would never again underestimate the power of free communication. In Australia, Aboriginal elders shared traditional stories that had been passed down through thousands of years of oral tradition. In India, poets read verses in dozens of different languages, while musicians played instruments from every region of the subcontinent. In Brazil, carnival music mixed with protest songs and children's lullabies. The alien ships were beginning to fall from the sky. Their quantum resonance chambers, overloaded beyond their design limits, were exploding in cascades of bright energy. Some ships tried to retreat into space, but their navigation systems had failed along with everything else. Dr. Carter monitored the alien communications frequencies and made a startling discovery. The HFY were trying to communicate with each other for the first time in millennia. The overwhelming exposure to human expression was awakening something in their minds that had been dormant for thousands of years. They're remembering how to talk, she announced excitedly to the Resistance Command Center. The human broadcasts are triggering some kind of recovery in their communication abilities. Amy Collins continued her broadcast from Manhattan as the crystal ship above the city began to descend in a controlled landing rather than a crash. The alien vessel's hull was cracked and sparking, but it was not attacking. Instead, strange sounds were coming from inside, sounds that almost resembled music. This is Amy Collins broadcasting from New York City, she said into the microphone as she watched the alien ship settle onto the ground in Central Park. Today, humanity found its voice again, and it sounds like freedom. Around the world, the communication storm continued as resistance fighters maintained their broadcasts. The aliens had wanted silence, but instead, they had received a symphony of human expression that was more complex and beautiful than anything their quantum resonance chambers could process. The tide of the war had turned not through superior weapons or tactics, but through the simple act of refusing to be quiet. Humanity had won by being exactly what the aliens had tried to suppress: loud, chaotic, emotional, and absolutely determined to keep talking. 3 months after Operation Babel, Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Earth Defense Station and watched as former alien harvesting ships floated peacefully alongside human vessels. The crystal ships had been converted into communication relay stations, broadcasting human music, literature, and art to distant star systems across the galaxy. The war had ended, not with surrender or destruction, but with something nobody had expected: redemption. Dr. Lisa Carter walked through the corridors of what had once been a Kethvar command ship, now serving as a research facility where humans and aliens worked together. The ship's quantum resonance chambers had been rebuilt as learning centers where Kethvar individuals slowly rediscovered their ability to communicate. "How are they progressing?" Jake asked as Lisa joined him on the observation deck. "Better than we hoped," Lisa replied, watching through the transparent walls as a group of young Kethvar practiced forming simple words with guidance from human teachers. "The ones who choose to stay and learn are making remarkable progress. They're remembering abilities their species lost thousands of years ago." Not all of the Kethvar had chosen to stay. When their ships were disabled during Operation Babel, the alien fleet had split into two groups. The majority, led by what Dr. Carter called the Old Guard, had departed Earth in the few ships that remained functional. They were unwilling to admit that their centuries of parasitic feeding had been wrong. But a significant number of Kethvar, led by an individual humans had nicknamed the Listener, had chosen to remain and learn. These aliens were horrified to discover what their civilization had become and wanted to redevelop their lost abilities through honest learning rather than theft. Captain Torres, now promoted to general, oversaw the integration of former Kethvar technology into Earth's defense systems. The alien signal dampeners had been reverse-engineered and converted into the most powerful communication networks humanity had ever possessed. "We can now broadcast to every inhabited system within 50 light years," Torres explained to President Walsh during her weekly briefing. "Our messages of peace and freedom are reaching civilizations that have never heard from Earth before." President Walsh had declared the formation of the Terran Communication Alliance immediately after the alien defeat. Earth's new mission was to protect the right of free expression for all intelligent species in the galaxy. The motto carved above the entrance to the new Alliance headquarters read, "Never again silent." Tim Baker, now 16 years old and serving as a junior translator, worked with young Kethvar who were learning to communicate for the first time in their lives. The aliens found human concepts like humor and sarcasm almost impossible to understand at first. But they were making progress. "Watch this," Tim said to his supervisor as he sat down with a group of young Kethvar. "Tell me a joke," he said to one of the aliens who had been studying human communication for several weeks. The Kethvar individual, whose crystal-like features had begun to show more expression over time, attempted what might have been a smile. "Why did the human cross the space station?" it asked in carefully pronounced English. "I don't know. Why?" Tim replied, encouraging the alien to continue. "To get to the other, to reach the different." The Kethvar struggled with the concept for a moment, then gave up. "I do not understand the purpose of this exercise." Tim laughed, and several of the other young aliens tried to imitate the sound. "That's okay. Humor is hard even for humans, sometimes. The important thing is that you're trying to express yourself." Amy Collins had been appointed as Earth's first Minister of Interspecies Communication. Her resistance cell had become the foundation for a new government department dedicated to maintaining peaceful contact with alien civilizations. Her office was located in the rebuilt United Nations building, which now served as headquarters for the Communication Alliance. "We've received responses from 12 different star systems," Amy reported to the Alliance Council. "Most of them are asking for help dealing with their own communication-suppressing governments. It seems the Kethvar weren't the only species that gave up free expression in exchange for technological advancement." Dr. Stone and Kate Miller had established a new university dedicated to studying the relationship between communication and consciousness. Their research had attracted scientists from around the world who wanted to understand how the ability to express complex thoughts and emotions was connected to intelligence and creativity. "We're learning that communication isn't just about sharing information," Dr. Stone explained to a class of human and Kethvar students. "It's about creating new ideas through the interaction of different minds. When the Kethvar gave up their ability to communicate freely, they stopped growing as individuals and as a civilization." The Listener, The Kethvar leader who had chosen to stay on Earth had become something like an ambassador between the two species. It spent its days learning human languages and trying to understand concepts that its people had forgotten millennia ago. "Your species possesses something we lost long ago," the listener explained to Dr. Carter during one of their regular conversations. "You create meaning through interaction. We became efficient at processing information, but we forgot how to generate new ideas." Ben Rodriguez had been put in charge of upgrading Earth's communication infrastructure using a combination of human and alien technology. The new systems could reach across interstellar distances while remaining completely secure from interference or jamming. "The Kethvar technology is incredible for long-range communication," Ben explained to his engineering team. "But it needs human creativity to give the messages meaning. Their quantum resonance chambers can carry our signals across the galaxy, but it takes human emotion and expression to make those signals worth receiving." Maria Santos had become Earth's chief communications officer, responsible for coordinating the constant stream of messages flowing between Earth and other worlds. Her job was to ensure that humanity's voice could be heard clearly across the galaxy. "We're not just broadcasting to other planets," Maria told the Alliance Council. "We're teaching other species that communication is a right, not a privilege. Every intelligent being should have the freedom to express their thoughts and feelings without fear." The former alien signal dampeners had been completely repurposed as amplification stations for human broadcasts. Where once they had enforced silence, they now projected human music, literature, and art to anyone in the galaxy who wanted to listen. Children across Earth grew up learning multiple languages, including the clicking and tonal patterns that some Kethvar were beginning to redevelop as they recovered their ancient communication abilities. Schools taught communication as both a skill and a fundamental right that must be protected. Admiral Morrison often stood on his observation deck and watched the mixed fleet of human and alien ships patrolling the solar system. The vessels worked together to ensure that no force would ever again try to silence Earth or any other world. 5 years ago, we thought we were alone in the universe, he reflected during an interview with a journalist. Now we know we're part of a galaxy full of intelligent life, much of it suppressed by governments that fear free expression. Our job is to make sure everyone has the right to speak their mind. The most important change was not technological, but philosophical. Humanity had learned that their greatest strength was not their weapons or their technology, but their refusal to be silenced. This lesson had been written into Earth's new constitution and was taught to every child from an early age. Tim Baker, now a young adult, worked as a senior translator and cultural ambassador. He often thought about the dark months when humanity had been forced into silence and how different the world had become since then. "The aliens thought they could make us quiet," he told a group of students during a lecture about the invasion. "But they didn't understand that humans don't know how to be silent. We'll always find a way to sing, to argue, to tell stories, and to share our dreams with anyone who will listen." In the distance, radio telescopes pointed toward distant stars, sending out messages of friendship and invitation to any civilization that might be listening. The messages were not demands or threats, but simple invitations to join the growing community of worlds that had chosen communication over silence. Earth had become a beacon in the galaxy, not because of its military power or technological advancement, but because it had proven that free expression was stronger than any weapon. The planet that had once faced invasion and enforced silence now broadcast its voice proudly across the cosmos, ensuring that the right to communicate would never again be threatened. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, other worlds that had been silent for too long began to find their voices and answer back.